Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 26 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading Jake Jackson's Myths and Legends, a book all about world mythologies from around the world. And this time we are covering the myths of the Algonquin people. We're in our second section on Native American mythologies. And in his introduction, he just kind of describes a little bit about the Algonquin people, where they lived. They were essentially to the north and to the west of the Iroquois we focused on last time. So kind of southern Canada, up all the way down into sort of the upper half of the United States, going all the way west to the Rocky Mountains for some tribes and going as far east as the Atlantic Ocean for some tribes. One of the largest groups of Native Americans with somewhere around 100 total tribes within the Algonquin people. What do you think of this chapter?
I liked it. It was more mythology,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed to me, like, the formation of humans and that type of stuff. I liked it. It was entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
I did like this. I like this one a lot. There's a lot of ties, I think, a lot of similarities between just the actual structure of the stories between this one and the Iroquois stories, just in the actual stories themselves. But we can get into that a little bit later.
Yes. So you liked it?
Mm-hmm. I liked it a lot. It was very good. Very interesting, one could say. So we start off with the first story, The Great Deeds of Michabo. A very powerful Manito, we saw these in the last time, these sort of ever-existing spirits, once visited the earth and fell in love with its only inhabitant, a beautiful young woman who then sadly died giving birth to their 4 sons. Michabo, the supreme deity of the Indians, who is sometimes represented as an invisible god and other times as a trickster. Chibiabos, who took charge of the dead and ruled the land of souls. Wabasso, who fled to the north and turned into a rabbit spirit. Jahanapok, who was of a fiery temperament and was always arguing with Michabo. Michabo had always attributed the death of their mother to Chukanipok, and so they fought frequently, once carrying off pieces of Chukanipok's flesh, which fell to the ground as flintstones, and so Chukanipok was known as Firestone. When Johanipok was finally slain, Michabo tore out his bowels to form the earth's vegetation, and then distributed tools and knowledge among men, also killing all the beasts of the evil spirit who prowled the world. When all this was done, Michabo placed 4 good spirits at each cardinal direction, instructing mankind to blow smoke from his calumet in each direction as a sign of respect. And then reading here from the book, the spirit of the north, he told them, would always provide snow and ice, enabling men to hunt game. The spirit of the south would give them melons, maize, and tobacco. The spirit he had placed in the west would ensure that rain fell upon the crops, and the spirit of the east would never fail to bring light in place of darkness. Then, retreating to an immense slab of ice in the northern ocean, Michabo kept a watchful eye on mankind, informing them that if ever the day should arrive when the wickedness forced him to part the earth, his footprints would catch fire and the end of the world would come, for it was he who directed the sun in his daily walks around the earth. What do you think of this story? This is another creation story. What was your sort of overall takeaway from this story?
Yeah, you can see the common themes between this and other myths, and the sons of the creators, I guess you'd say, and then they one for the east, west, north, and south,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I had 4 sons, so that you could each conquer your own lands.
Which one am I? Which cardinal direction am I?
I don't know. I think don't you have to decide those?
Oh, yeah. We'll have to work that out amongst ourselves then.
Yes, you have. Well, nobody's claimed one direction yet, so I think
So whichever one I want, really, because I don't know if any of my brothers know about this plan.
not yet. But it's I just saw a lot of similarities between other myths, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it was just strikingly similar to almost the exact same thing as the creation story of the Iroquois. I mean, we have slightly more characters, but at the end of the day, it's all about the struggle between 2 brothers. Of the Iroquois, we saw the good mind and the bad mind, but here we see Michabo and Chocanipok. One, of course, is kind of representing the good, one's kind of the evil, and as they fight, essentially all of the world is created, and that's sort of the creation myth here. So I think that's really a very noticeable similarity. And also the cardinal directions is interesting, because, I guess you would think that would have more importance in a lot of other mythologies, just figuring your way out around the world. But I don't know of many that specifically in the creation myth, in how the world was created, he set up these spirits for the 4 cardinal directions. I know we have deities for the cardinal directions in a lot of mythologies, but this is one of the first things that happens, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other points on Michabo's great deeds?
No.
Fantastic commentary. Moving on to the next story. Michibo defeats the King of Fishes. One morning, Michibo went out upon the lake in his canoe, calling out for Mishanamagwai, the King of Fishes, to grab hold of his bait. And disturbed from his rest, the King of Fishes ordered a trout to take the bait in his place. Pulling up the fish, Michibo scolded it, and the trout let go, and Michibo resumed his calling. Still annoyed, the King of Fishes ordered a sunfish to take the bait, and again Michibo scolded it, resuming his calling. By now, Mishanamagwai was furious, and so he grabbed the bait, and when he reached the surface, he opened his mouth and swallowed Michibo, canoe and all. Finding his club in the fish's stomach, Michibo began to beat it wildly, but the king hurled him to and fro, and he was worried that he would be thrown out to drown. So Michibo rammed his canoe down the fish's throat, killing it and making it wash up on shore. However, Michibo was faced with a bigger problem, for he had no way to get out of the fish. But he suddenly heard a tapping noise above him, and a light shone down, for it was the gulls beginning to eat the fish, and they were carving a hole in its skin. They soon rescued Michibo, and he named them the Kiosk, or Noble Scratchers, giving them his special blessing. Michibo then breathed life into the King of Fishes, who then resumed his rest at the bottom of the water. This was another interesting one. I think a lot of ties to a lot of other stories. Interestingly, I don't know what the significance of those ties are, but I think, one that comes to mind is, being swallowed by a whale or a big fish. And that just reminded me of the story of Jonah and the whale in Christian and Jewish tradition. But also, this was very, very similar to a Norse myth when Thor goes out in a little boat to have a fishing competition with one of the giants, one of the ice giants. But he ends up catching the world serpent, which is this giant snake that encircles the world, and he has this big battle because he's destined to fight it at the end of the world. And so it's another story of him pulling up this big fish from the bottom of the ocean, which is a weird connection there. I'm not sure what the significance of that would be to have that sort of tie there, but it's definitely something that reminded me of that Norse story.
Yeah, and I think wasn't the Jonah. I should know this, but it wasn't Jonah wasn't he sent on a mission to go to a town,
Mm-hmm.
and he refused to go, and then the whale ate him and puked him out back in the direction he was supposed to go in, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But and this is a little bit different, that he's taunting the King of the Fishes, and I guess it's kind of like his arrogance, and there's really no point to him trying to catch the King of the Fishes, and finally the King of the Fishes, eats him, and then the only way out, or then he kills the King of the Fishes, but seems to have learned some sort of lesson that, and then he heals the fish at the end, which I guess was nice, but.
I'm not so sure if there is so much of a moral there, because like in that Thor story I was saying about, pulling up Jormungandr from the ocean, it's really not just you should learn something from this. It's just like Thor did this cool thing. He brought up this big fish, and I think that might be sort of just a similar story here. Just Michibo, he's this cool dude. Look at this big fish he pulled up. He's pretty powerful. So it's kind of just like a characterization story almost.
I disagree completely.
Really?
Absolutely a morality tale. A fish tale, because he is humbled.
That is true.
And he has some sort of insight, and he's like, oh my, what did I get myself into? I'm stuck in this dead fish, and I'm gonna die in a dead fish. It was only because the seagulls, who everybody generally hates as like flying rats, peck their way, and maybe the tribes valued seagulls more than anybody else, so maybe this is an explanation of why people like seagulls in their culture or something. But it seemed like he was humbled by that, and that's why he gave them a regal name, and then he healed the fish after all that's said and done.
That's true. That does make sense. That's an excellent point.
Thank you. I have one a day.
And that's it for the rest of the podcast. Nothing else.
I got nothing else for the podcast, but I've got a couple more hours before I go to bed, and I got nothing else. I've been saving up.
Oh boy. The next story is that of the Land of Souls. The wedding ceremony of an Algonquin chief was approaching, but on the eve of the wedding, his bride-to-be succumbed to a fever and died, leaving the chief distraught and no longer wanting to hunt or fish, resolving to never again use his bow. One day, he overheard a conversation among the elders describing a path to the spirit world that would enable the living to visit the dead. So he took up his bow once more and set out to find the path, feeling compelled to travel south. After 14 days of journeying, he noticed the snow melting and flowers emerging, and he knew he was approaching the land of souls. Passing through a dark grove, he came upon a lodge on a hill, and in a doorway stood a man with white hair and gleaming eyes who beckoned the youth inside. He already knew the man's mission, saying that his bride had stayed in the lodge only a few days ago, then telling him that he must leave behind his body and his bow to proceed farther, but the journey ahead was perilous, for he must cross a vast lake to reach the island of the Blessed. The youth wasn't frightened and set out swiftly, soon realizing he was now a spirit floating effortlessly through the air. He then reached the lake, seeing a shimmering island in the distance, and so he set out in a white canoe that was docked on the shore. And he soon noticed that he was not alone on the waters, for his bride was in an identical canoe next to him to accompany him to the island of the Blessed. At first, the lake was as smooth as glass, but as he neared the halfway mark, the waves began to swell, and the youth saw the bones of all those who had attempted this journey before floating on the water. Though filled with terror, he continued to row boldly ahead, and the Master of Life, knowing that they were innocent children, decreed that the chief and his bride should reach the island unharmed, so the waters calmed and the couple reached the shore. For 3 days and 3 nights the pair lived in the paradise, where all was bliss, but on the 3rd night the young chief was woken by the gentle voice of the Master of Life, telling him that it was not yet his time, and he must return to lead his people wisely, as was his destiny. He rose obediently, returning to his body that he had left at the old man's lodge, and though he was heavy-hearted, he was not resentful, but honored that the Master of Life had intervened to correct his course. He then became a just and kindly ruler, and after long hunts, he would call together his people and tell them of the land of souls. So what do you think of this story?
So it's a fun story because it's so similar to so many. It's like a universal story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems so common in these mythologies in different areas, geographical areas,
Mm-hmm.
and societies where somebody's so distraught they want to go get their person or visit their person in the other world. You know, after they
Mm-hmm.
pass. It
Well,
seems like it's. I'm sorry.
I was
What?
just gonna, if you have more to say, keep going, but I was just gonna jump in there.
Yeah, I do. I do have another thing to say.
Go ahead.
I'm,
Go ahead.
I'm a little interested in that. It seems to be commonly like a lover or wife,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to remember example of a child.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was one. Wasn't there one with a mother? He went to go get his mother back or something.
I'm not sure. I don't know, but it's definitely
Wasn't
a
that one of
common
the
theme.
Jason and the Argonauts thing? There's who went to the netherworld to get somebody back. It was one of their soldiers, I guess.
That was Orpheus, wasn't it, with the lyre?
Yes, that guy never told the truth.
No,
Oh,
that was a terrible one.
but it would seem, yeah. I mean, it was just kind of a interesting story about how he, you know, kind of earned his way for a visit and then
Mhm.
was content. You know, I guess assuming that he knew that she was in a, you know, a great place, and eventually, if he lived his life properly, he would see her again.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting to me because, at least to me, it seems like it's the exact same story structure as the tale of Siaggio and the Magic Cup that we saw in the last episode with the Iroquois myth, because Siaggio, he lost in this case, it was his sister, and he set out to find the land of souls, came across a white bearded man who helped him on the journey, told him what he needed to do. Eventually did find his sister. The difference between here and Siaggio captured her, but she doesn't want to spend any time with him, and then he comes to terms with it. In this case, this brave youth does find his bride, and she does spend some time with him, but at the end of the day, they do, you know, realize, well, things are as they should be, basically, and I have to move on with my life. But it's interesting because I think this might be one of the reasons why I like mythology so much, is because it is very similar to language, and that you can kind of reconstruct like the original story or language from what we have now, like going back, you know, figuring out, you know, what's common between languages or common between stories here. And so it seems like this story of the Land of Souls could be stem from the exact same story that was told last episode with the Iroquois people, just branched off in the details. And I think, you know, we see this white bearded man who's probably the exact same figure in both stories. He just happens to take a slightly different role. But it's really striking that the actual story structure is just about exactly the same, which I thought was very, very fascinating.
Yeah, I wonder if it really happened that way, and it just kind of got retold in a different way over time. Yeah, there really was a dude in the woods, you know, a white bearded man, and went to the land of souls and stuff.
True. It
I
could
wonder
be.
where that place is now.
Well, south, apparently.
Would you want, yeah, south where it's flowery, I guess.
Mhm.
So would you want to go get someone or visit someone in the land of souls?
I guess I would. I mean, at least in this particular like kind of concept of the afterlife, it's very pleasant, noticeably very pleasant. At least until he gets to that lake. That's kind of like the horror aspect of it. But I thought that was interesting to note is that it's a very very pleasant afterlife. He goes south and the snow melts and he's in this land of growth and greenery and he's on the edge of the land of souls and he of course has to travel that really terrible island, travel that terrible lake. But then he gets to this beautiful island and all's pretty good for 3 days until he's like, yeah. Got to go home. So I don't know.
Right.
It was a very nice
Well,
depiction.
not knowing that it's going to turn out great, because
Mhm.
obviously there are other guys that tried it and were not successful.
That is true. That is true.
I don't think I'd risk it.
Yeah,
I don't-
probably
I
not.
don't- Yeah, I'd be sad, but I don't think I'd be trying to get them back.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of bad stories, like horror stories in American literature about
Mhm.
people trying to raise people from the dead, and it always goes south.
Yeah.
You know, they're a zombie, or whatever.
Mhm.
I don't, I guess, but it's it's parallels to all these other stories about going to Hades and that kind
Mhm.
of stuff, and
Yeah, that's true. Very, very common themes there.
yeah,
The next story is that of the gift of corn. A poor Indian lived in the forest with his family, and they often had only the leaves of trees to satisfy their hunger. And as the eldest son saw his father struggle, he longed for the time when he would be able to help him. At last, the boy reached the age of the great fast, where he was obliged to shut himself away without food, empty his mind of every evil thought, and meditate earnestly on the generosity of the Great Spirit. As the boy roamed the wilderness, he was aware that he and his family were indebted to the Great Spirit, but he still wondered why the divine ruler had not made it easier for them to find food, and so he decided to pray for the Great Spirit to reveal to him how he could ease his family's hardship. It was now his 5th day without food, and as he drifted in and out of sleep, a light filled the room he was in, and a stranger appeared before him, clothed in a green and yellow robe, and his head was donned with jade-green feathers. The stranger spoke in a sweet voice, saying that the Great Spirit had sent him to lead the boy, then telling him that they must wrestle. Though he was weak, the boy stood courageously, and the struggle was long, and just as the boy began to faint, the stranger ended the conflict, promising to return the next day, and so he vanished.
Hey, I want to interrupt here. I should have told you, but if there's a sweetly dressed, handsome man that says you got to wrestle me several days in a row, and then I'll give you some great gift at the end, don't do it. It's not going to turn out like the God of Corn.
Yeah,
story.
yeah, I figured that's a good life lesson to learn there. Thank you for
I
that.
just want to make sure that I covered that. Someplace. I feel bad if some handsome strangers, they said, "Hey, wait a second. It might be the God of Corn." It's not the God of Corn. Go ahead. It's just some dude who wants to wrestle you when you're really hungry.
Anyway, the next morning, the celestial visitor returned, and they fought again. And as they battled on, the boy felt his strength increase, and soon the visitor cried out in pain. I'm going to read again from this story here. "You have certainly proven your worth today," the stranger declared. "Now it is my turn to rest before we begin our final trial. Tomorrow will be the 7th day of your fast," he continued, "and your father will bring you food to strengthen you. In the evening you will wrestle with me and easily overcome me, for you have succeeded in winning the favor of the Great Spirit. As soon as I have fallen, you must strip me of my garments and bury me in the earth. Once a month, come and cover me with fresh soil and make certain that no weeds or grass are allowed to grow upon my grave. If you do all this, I shall return to life, and I promise that you will see me again, splendidly clothed in a garment of green." The stranger had no sooner spoken these words than he vanished into thin air, leaving his opponent to fathom the meaning of all that he had been told. The next day, the father brought a basket of food to his son, but he refused it, determined to prove his strength without assistant. Once again, the stranger appeared, and the boy felt invigorated, pushing him violently into the ground, killing the visitor instantly, and a deep sadness and regret filled him, and he vowed to tend his friend's grave as lovingly as if it was his mother's. Throughout the spring, the boy never missed a day in tending the grass, weeding the grass, and carrying fresh soil to the grave. And by summertime, tiny shoots began to appear, and the boy didn't remove them, for they reminded him of his friend's green plume of feathers. The boy never revealed the purpose of his daily excursions, but one day he asked his father to accompany him. And at the grave, they saw that the shoots had grown into beautiful plants, each one bearing a golden cluster. Again, I'm going to read from the book. Leaping for joy, the young boy began shouting aloud, "It is my friend, the friend of my vision, who promised he would return to me. It is Mondamin," from the words Moedo, meaning spirit, and Min, meaning grain or berry, replied his father, filled with admiration for his son. It is the spirit grain the old ones have sometimes spoken of, the Indian corn which the merciful master has sent to nourish us because he is greatly pleased with you. And the two began to gather the golden ears of corn, tearing away the green husks from the stalks as once the young boy had torn away the garments of his extraordinary wrestling companion. From that day forward, the people no longer depended entirely on hunting and were blessed with beautiful fields of healthy grain, which they harvested every year, just as soon as the long, white, hot summer had begun to fade into autumn. What'd you think of this one?
We're going to have a new rule.
Oh, no.
You can only read excerpts from the stories. You only read one per story.
I'm so sorry. I'll keep that in mind.
Because otherwise, it will just turn into an audiobook.
I like those descriptions.
Well, I do too. I think you got to prioritize.
All right.
One per story, maximum.
Okay.
But yeah, one of those kind of like odd, the guy has to go off into the wilderness and meditate for a while. Then he, it's an origin story of where corn came from because it's such an important crop. Still is to this day for survival of the humans and all that kind of stuff. And he had to kill the guy to get it, and then he buried him, and boop, there comes the corn.
True. I've actually been taking a plant science class this semester. And so, one of the big things I've learned is that you just really don't realize how important, agriculture really was unless you kind of think about it, because, that's what really allowed every single civilization ever to flourish. As soon as you could sit down and not have to move around for food your entire life, then you can develop literally anything else, language, written language, culture, traditions, that sort of thing. Because if you're moving around hunting or foraging, then you have to spend all of your time doing that. So it makes sense that there is this big sort of mystical figure representing corn here, because that would have been a very revolutionary stage in sort of the evolution of a people.
Well, that's what the theory is about ancient Greece and how they had so many republics come in. Democracies and be formed around the same time and the same age, because they finally had essentially a middle class that were somewhat self-sufficient because of the land and the environment allowed them to grow on one farm grapes, grain, and olives. And the combination of those three crops, which spread out over the growing seasons, and you're able to store them, what allowed them to, if you have a farm, I'm trying to remember what the size of the farms were, but 20 acres, maybe less, and you can support your family and actually put stuff aside, and then you can think about other issues. Like you said, you could be grounded, you don't have to travel, you could have a little bit extra time to be able to think about those issues and to be self-governing, and then you're not dependent upon some lord or king or something, because you have your own area. And so I think there's a lot of truth to that. And boy, I'm completely ignorant of agriculture and how to do those things on a larger scale. And when you even study a little bit, I remember getting a tour down in St. John of a couple of different facilities, but one of them was a regional fertilizer and pesticide provider for the farmers in that region. And the science that goes into that stuff now is just unbelievable. It's really high tech and pretty neat, but that's a little bit getting off topic.
Well, it is actually kind of interesting that you mentioned that you have no idea about agriculture and finding food and stuff, because that's a big part of what happened in the agricultural revolution, is that anybody who wasn't actively making food, of course, didn't have to know anything about it, and so that knowledge was completely lost, except amongst the people who made food. So it's I have no idea what plants around me are safe to eat or not, because it's not necessary. So it's kind of a trade-off, I guess, not knowing what leaves are safe to eat, and then all of culture. So, it's I think it's a fair trade.
Well, I mean, it's not exclusive. You can actually know that stuff, and also, know all the other things too. We have the luxury of being able to have the knowledge of both and be able to do it.
True.
And when the apocalypse comes, which seems to be coming closer every day, we're going to have to know how to grow our own crops and, raise a pig or two.
That's true.
Else we're in trouble.
In the apocalypse, it might be worth it to wrestle a strange, handsome man that visits us on the chance that he will give us corn.
Well, we probably won't have a lot of time to meditate and fast.
True.
But
True.
although it would be involuntarily fasting. I'm on 5 days of my fast. You're just starving to death. Oh, okay. I was deep in thought while I was starving.
Well, on that uplifting note, we're moving on to the next story, which is Muis, the snow husband. In a northern village, there lived a beautiful maiden who had a host of admirers, but she treated them as playthings, no matter how sincere they were. One noble brave desired to take her as his wife, and when he poured out every detail of his passion to her, she laughed aloud and mocked him with her friends. And a deep melancholy filled the brave, and he refused to eat, drink, or speak, and when his family left for their summer camp, he remained behind. He then prayed earnestly to his Manito for aid in avenging himself against the maiden, and he then felt compelled to gather up old cloth scraps and make a coat. And then he arranged animal bones in the shape of a human skeleton, and then covered these bones with snow into the shape of a man. And with his Manito, he breathed life into this figure and clothed it. He named this new man Muis, and they went together to the lodge of the maiden, who was deeply infatuated with the handsome stranger Muis, offering him her father's chair by the fire. But Muis declined, not wanting to melt, but this was perceived as a humble gesture. The next day, Muis announced his intention to marry the maiden, and they were married within a week, spending some time together, when one day Muis declared he must depart on a long and arduous journey. His wife asked to accompany him, but Muis was instructed by the brave to not let her follow. But her pleas awoke pity within him, and so he went to the brave for advice, but he simply said that it was her own folly to follow him. The couple then set out, and the wife soon fell behind, and Muis pressed on rapidly, coming to the open plains where the sun shone on him, causing him to slowly melt, his robe falling off in fragments. At length the bride resumed her pursuit, coming upon the fragments of the cloth, and so she cried out. I'm going to read here again from the book. Muis, Muis, ninge won ne winig, ne won e wig. You have led me astray, I cannot find my way. But the young wife received no reply. Now frantic with fear, she began running about wildly, through the forests, among the thickets, over the rocks, in every possible direction, hoping to catch sight of her handsome husband walking in the distance. The years passed, and still she roamed the countryside, calling aloud to the air. Her face lined with exhaustion, her body stooped and twisted in sorrow. On and on she wandered until the day finally arrived for her to be released from her punishment. Falling wearily to the ground, she uttered her husband's name one last time before passing away. In an instant her spirit rose from her body, ascending high above the spot in the deep recesses of the wood where she had eventually come to rest. But even to this day it is said that her unhappy voice is often heard on the breeze, calling through the trees in search of her snow husband. Muis, Muis, ninge wane winig, ne wane wig. What'd you think of that section?
I was in the woods the other day. I was wondering what that thing was saying. I needed an interpreter. Muis, what the heck is that thing saying? This is the first of the mean-spirited myths in this chapter. I just thought it was really kind of cruel, this guy, that, granted, she shouldn't have been, so disdainful of his emotional outburst, pledging his love to this gal, but, sometimes they don't like you.
That's true.
And when I was a young man, if women didn't like me, that was not such a surprise as it was evidently to this young man. He was quite shocked and hurt, and so he crafted a very good-looking and, well, it seemed like a good-natured Frosty the Snowman. Because the Frosty the Snowman didn't want to lead her off into the woods, but he had to do what he was told because this guy is Frosty, and then she was devoted to this Frosty the Snowman, and then died.
Yeah.
And now her calling out and screaming for her lost lover is forever on the wind.
Yeah, I don't know.
Seems very sad and cruel.
I don't know if the punishment is exactly equal to the crime here. I mean, rejecting a dude and then him constructing a sentient snowman to lead her to her death is a little extreme, I think. I don't know if you can really justify that one there.
Right, he sends a snowman off into the warm weather. He should have said, "Go north," for crying out loud. Come back when it snows. He melts and dies. Which reminds me, and I'm just going to make the point, even as off topic, that magician in the Frosty the Snowman is just a murderer. All right, he was just a flat out murderer, and melted Frosty the Snowman in that greenhouse, thinking that he was killing him. He didn't know that Santa could come by, open the door, and recreate him with the Santa magic. But man, that guy was just a cold-blooded killer, and he was going to kill the girl too.
True.
Kill a little child because he wanted his magic hat back.
You've ranted
Another
to
reason,
me about
another
that
reason
so
never
many
to trust a
times.
magician.
That's the two lessons we have learned from Native
Yes.
American mythology. Don't wrestle with a handsome stranger, and don't trust magicians. Those are the two lessons.
That's correct. Yes. So what were your thoughts of this one?
I really like this story. I thought it was interesting. It definitely seems to have some sort of like metaphor as to like the changing of the seasons is kind of what I got here with sort of the spring like calling again for the winter, which is now gone. And I guess that's kind of the voice on the wind and the trees is sort of the spirit of the spring calling for the spirit of the winter as they kind of change. So because it definitely seems like an explanation for a natural occurrence because it all seems to be inspired by like those closing words. So somebody like must have heard, the breeze in the trees. That sounds like something in our language. What's that saying? You kind of put words to it and make up this story from there, which is kind of the vibe that I got. But I don't know.
That's,
Could
that's
be wrong.
brilliant. I didn't even think about the spring calling up to the winter and the change in seasons. That's deep thoughts there.
Oh, well,
Good
thank
job.
you. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
The next story is that of the beaver medicine legend. There once lived two orphaned sons of a noble chief, Napatsis, who was well-meaning and gentle, but was prone to impulsive behavior, and his younger brother Akayan, who was very intelligent. Napatsis returned home one day with a wife, but he knew little about her, but he was sure that he loved her, and Akayan welcomed her into their home. Weeks passed by smoothly, with Napatsis always setting time aside in the evenings to talk with Akayan, but his wife grew jealous of this, telling Napatsis to get rid of Akayan, but he refused. She then came up with a plan to be rid of him, and so she tore at her clothes and clawed at her skin and hair, and when Nopatsis returned home, she said that Akayan had treated her brutally. Nopatsis was consumed with thoughts of revenge, never once considering if his brother was innocent. One day the brothers set out on a raft to an island where the tribe gathered the bright feathers of waterfowl every year, and they separated to gather the feathers. When Akayan returned to the shore, he saw Nopatsis sailing away and called for him to return. Nopatsis rode onwards, hurling abuse at Akayan, despite Akayan's protest that he had never harmed his sister-in-law. And as night closed in, Akayan knew he would certainly die without food and water, and so prayed earnestly to the spirits of nature, the sun and moon, for guidance, building himself a small hut. The next morning, a little beaver stood in the doorway, telling Akayan that his father would like to speak with him. So Akayan followed the beaver to a large lodge in which dwelt Great Beaver and his family, who was the most ancient, revered, and wisest of all beavers. Akayan told Great Beaver his story, and Great Beaver said that he should spend the winter with them, where he would be well cared for. And so they kept him warm by placing their bodies alongside his, and taught him the art of healing, planting and smoking tobacco, and several sacred ceremonies relating to medicine. Summer returned, and Akayan emerged back above ground, where he saw Napatsis' raft on the shore, and he knew this was his opportunity to leave, returning to the lodge to take leave of his friends, where Great Beaver told him to take something to remember them by. Akayan then asked to take Great Beaver's youngest child. Great Beaver finally agreed to this, counseling Little Beaver, his son, to construct a sacred beaver bundle when he returned on the mainland. Akayan soon returned to his tribe, who rejoiced in seeing him, and asked for his story, and so Akayan told them, after which Little Beaver told them of the mystery of medicine, calling for a beaver bundle to be made, to which every man contributed a relic conveying good or ill luck. When Little Beaver was sure that he had accomplished his task of instruction, he asked to be returned to the island, and so Akayan returned him, finding the bones of his brother there. Reading again from the book, every spring Akayan set off in his little raft to visit the beavers, and on each occasion he received some important object to add to his beaver medicine bundle, until it reached a great size, bringing him prosperity and good fortune. Soon afterwards he married a wholesome woman, and together they founded a race of medicine men, who never failed to pass on the traditions and ceremonials of the beaver medicine to their own offspring, ensuring that the good works of Akayan and Little Beaver have remained with us even to this day. What do you think of this little story here?
Well, well,
Good thoughts.
I guess I have a number of thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start with the fact that even in Native American mythology, many, I don't know, hundreds of years ago, they knew not to believe all women. How do you like that one?
That is a hot take right there.
And because she basically faked an attack,
Mm-hmm.
and I wonder what happened to this devious woman who separated these two brothers, and the one brother died on this island,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if that is a just punishment for him either. He's just a good-natured, too kind of dumb,
Mm-hmm.
too trusting guy, and his wife said she was attacked by the brother. Of course, he shouldn't have just discarded his brother's protestations so quickly, but still, he died. We don't know what happened to her.
Yeah, well, that's actually kind of a common thing in like fairy tales and other mythologies. I told you maybe last episode, a couple episodes ago, I was reading a book about Moroccan folk tales, and a lot of those have to do with like a new stepmother, new wife, either wanting to kick out a younger daughter or a sibling or something like that. And oftentimes, she always tricks the husband into thinking it was this other person they should be kicked out. And oftentimes, it's the husband who was tricked that is punished. And usually, like the new wife just gets away scot-free, which is interesting to cross culturally. Usually, the wife is not blamed, but the person who was tricked. So I guess it's more of a morality tale saying, don't be tricked instead of don't trick others is really a bigger message here. I mean, of course, it's saying you're evil if you trick others, but you should especially be careful who's trying to trick you.
Yes, and even as a young man, you'd have guys that will become, you say, whipped. Like they'll just do whatever their new girl says, and you won't see them. That's like,
oh, I'm well aware. I know that happens.
You just be like a good friend, and they just disappear. So they don't even respond to texts or anything. Back then, it was phone calls, and then like 9 months later, hey, Bishop, what's going on? Oh, what happened to you? Oh, you're back. Oh, well, we broke up. Oh, okay, well, let's do something this weekend. Okay, yeah, but kind of not obviously. And my comment about not believing all women, that was, I think those kind of universal calls to believe any huge group of people, no matter how ridiculous the story, is an invitation to danger and childish, quite frankly, because there should be an ability to adjudicate those cases without just completely throwing out constitutional protections and the possibility that people make up stuff, which we're all sinners. And there's a fair number of that going on too, but it's a distinct minority.
I think there's another morality tale in there. Sorry to cut you off, but it says in the beginning, he doesn't know hardly anything about this woman. He's just sure that he loves her, which is not a good sign. Not a good sign at all.
That's what you call a red flag. Hey, I just met this gal and I married her. What do you think of her? Oh, I think she's great. Let's go work out. Fantastic. And then the next thing you know, you're dumped on a deserted island by your brother. What? Thank God for the beaver.
True. But what were you saying? I cut you off there when I was saying.
No, I think I was finishing up.
I was finishing up.
I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, I really like that story. It's a good little morality tale there.
That's also it's kind of mean spirited a little bit.
A little bit.
I don't like that he abandoned his brother on the island. I don't like that.
Yeah.
I think he should have gone back for him. I don't just because it was wrong that his brother abandoned him there, left him for dead. I don't like the idea that he then did the same thing to his brother, essentially.
Well, I think it's also important to note, like, just about in every civilization, banishment was really the number one punishment for everything for a very, very long time until we actually figured out how to build prisons effectively. So it's like, you do something wrong that harms somebody else, well, best of luck to you, get out. We don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. And so I think that's kind of where that sort of aspect is coming in. If you do something wrong to me, you're kicked out of the tribe, get out. We don't want you.
Yeah, back then it's essentially a death sentence because you're out in the wild, and maybe you can take care of yourself. It depends on what you take with you, but it's not easy to survive on your own in the wild when there's no public amenities, period. And there's rival tribes. I mean, there's other humans are more of a hazard than anything.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's right. It's good point. I guess it's basically like, well, see if you can get the magic beaver to help you out, jerk. I guess magic beaver said no because no, his bone.
Apparently.
Yeah.
The final story for this section on Algonquin myths is the legend of Scarface.
Not the same as the movie.
I knew you were going to say that. I predicted that as soon as I read the title of this story. I knew you were going to say that.
which is a dark movie, very entertaining, but very very dark.
I've never seen it. Is that the one where the dude's like up in the balcony and he says, "Say hello to my little friend," or is that a different
Hello, my
movie?
little friend. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then I think that's when he lets off the. Is that when he lets off the grenade launchers, or is it just automatic weapon?
Oh, I don't know.
That's his little friend. But yeah, there's killings throughout of it, and yeah, then it's dark, but I mean it's very entertaining. Al
Mhm.
Pacino's the lead character. It's
Yeah.
becoming like a cult classic.
Yes.
A lot of twists and turns in that story. It's a good movie, but it's not very uplifting.
Hmm. This is a very different Scarface that we're going to talk about here.
Correct.
So, a long time ago, there lived a beautiful maiden who refused every suitor that came to her, and she eventually told her parents that the sun god had agreed that she should not marry anyone but him so that she will live to a great age. In a nearby village, there lived a young warrior.
Hold on. So it wasn't just that. It was that she had to not marry somebody else because then at some point she would marry him, right?
Mhm.
Isn't that like she had to refrain from that
Mhm.
because eventually the sun god's going to marry her.
Yes, essentially the sun god had come to her and said, "You are going to be my wife at some point in the future. Don't marry anyone else."
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
In a nearby village, there lived a young warrior with a brave and noble spirit who had once been slashed by a grizzly bear, leaving a long scar on his cheek, and so he's known as Scarface and was relentlessly mocked.
Well, now let's hold on. There's a little more detail in that
Uh-huh.
because unless you're going to say it, he was like he had no family
Mhm.
and he had no status and he was scarred, like a disfiguring scar in his face. But he was of great character and he supported himself and is a good dude.
Mhm. True. Sorry, I might be skipping some details because this is a long story and I only have so much patience to write down notes in my little notebook.
Oh, you don't want to read the whole thing to the audience like you did the last one?
I'll get there. I'll get there. I'll get my
Okay.
reading section in. One day, the other young men told him to ask the beautiful maiden to marry him, and so he went to find her. He saw her among the banks of a stream, and he told her of his passion for her, but she politely turned him down, although she was thankful to find someone finally with a noble spirit who asked her, and she explained
Well, and his buddies were like, "Oh yeah, hey, ugly Scarface, why don't you go ask her out?" And he's like, "Oh, well, you know what? I think I will."
Yeah.
And then he did earnestly and straightforwardly, and she was impressed by that. She said, "Well, I'm sorry. The sun god says he's going to marry me, so I can't marry you. But heck, you're a neat guy. So if you get the sun god to say it's okay, and as a sign of the sun god saying it's okay, you gotta get him to heal that ugly, disfiguring scar on your face, which coincidentally will make you a lot more attractive to me."
Yeah, that was word for word what she said, actually. That's, yes.
I'm paraphrasing.
You are paraphrasing.
It's
You are
like you're paraphrasing from this book, but
That is true.
Skip that part. Go to the next.
That is true. Scarface was sad, but he never refused a challenge, and so he set out, finally coming to a bear's cave to ask where to find the sun god. But the bear sent him to ask a badger, who sent him to ask a wolverine, who at last led him to the edge of a great black lake. About to give up at the impossible task of crossing the lake, several swans approached Scarface and carried him across the lake, and he came to a broad trail on the other side. He then came across a large pile of treasures, including gold-tipped arrows, and although he was tempted to take them, he knew that would be dishonorable and pressed on. He then saw a very handsome man up ahead of him, who asked Scarface if he had seen his arrows, and he replied that he had, and the young man responded that he was impressed with Scarface's honesty and integrity, revealing himself to be Apsirats, the morning star and son of the sun god. Apsirats then led Scarface to his lodge, where his mother Kikomikis, the moon goddess, welcomed the visitor, and the sun god invited him to stay and embrace the guidance of Apsirats. The sun god told Apsirats to show Scarface their kingdom, but to never hunt near the great water, and for many months Scarface grew to love his hosts as family. One day Apsirats and Scarface found themselves near the great water, and Apsirats said that they should hunt the birds that dwelt there. Scarface protested, but he was forced to follow Apsirats into the water to protect him. The monstrous birds had attacked Apsirats, but Scarface slew them all, then hurrying back to the lodge where the sun god praised Scarface, promising to do anything to repay him. Scarface then told them of the maiden. The sun god then said that his kindness and patience had earned him the maiden, and he could return and make her his wife. The sun god asked Scarface to build a round lodge back home and to paint it red to remind him of his time in the sun god's kingdom, and that would be a medicine lodge where the sun god would help him in times of illness and hardship. The sun god also told him of sun medicine and made his scar disappear, then pointing him to a route home through the Milky Way. A crowd formed as Scarface returned, admiring his fine clothes and many treasures, but he pushed past all of them, finding the beautiful maiden. Now here's where I'm going to read my section of the book, which I know you love. The trail was
good. I just don't want you to read like 5 sections of them.
The trail was long and tortuous, he told her as he walked boldly forward, but I found the lodge of the sun god, and I won his favor. He has taken away my scar and given me all these things as proof of his consent. Come with me now and be my wife, for that is the sun god's greatest wish. The maiden ran towards him and fell upon his breast, tears of great joy flowing freely down her cheeks. That same day the young couple were married, and before long they had raised a great medicine lodge to the sun god. During the long years ahead, they were never sick or troubled in any way, and were blessed with 2 fine, strong children, a girl and a boy, whom they named Apsirats and Kikomikis. This legend is attributed to the famous Blackfeet tribe of the Western Territories. I really like this story. I really like how you get into like the actual, structure of the pantheon of gods a little bit, where we see the sun god and his wife and his son, who are definitely very big figures, it seems. Sort of this sort of goal to pursue them, this MacGuffin, I guess, to find the sun god and get this sun medicine and return back. So it's neat to see that sort of cosmology there, this pantheon. And it's also interesting because I think this is, in my understanding, sort of a representation of, what outer space is. Because if you look up at night, I think that great black lake is really just, this is what's up in the sky at night. You have to cross this lake and you get to this, beautiful island, this beautiful kingdom, which must be, the sun. Because again, at the end, he says, paint this big round lodge red, which must mean that, the sun kingdom was this big round, sort of sphere of a kingdom. And then when he comes back home, he goes through the Milky Way, which I think is just, this is this dude who went up into the stars and he found this great kingdom up there, which I think is a very, very neat story to tell.
Yeah. And what wasn't the sun god's wife basically the moon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
She was the moon.
And then the sun wasn't the sun responsible for the chariot going across, or is that a different?
That was actually the first story. He was responsible for the sun going across. You're thinking of the Greek myths.
Oh, hey, that chariot that goes across the sky.
Yeah, Helios. That's the Greek god there.
There you go. That's what I meant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure.
But seemed to be very similar type stories. Sun god, moon goddess, that type of stuff.
Yeah, which I wish we could have gotten a little bit more of those types of stories. I mean, I think we've critiqued this several times in the book, but like just talking about the pantheon of gods and what these gods represent. But instead, we get a lot more hero stories, which I mean are good in their own right. But I don't know, it's just an interesting balance, because I think when most people think of myths, they think of, these are the gods and the goddesses and their adventures, rather than here's the heroes and the sort of journeys they went on. But still interesting all the same.
Yep. Yeah, it's it is fascinating that the sun gods are always male, and the moon gods are always female.
Mm-hmm. I think there are a couple exceptions, but yeah, I think by and large, throughout, cultures, the sun is male and the moon is female. I'd be interested to know why that is. But I don't know off the top of my head. I know in Tolkien's mythology, his invented mythology, it's the opposite. The moon is a male and the sun is a female. And the story that he tells is that, the sun is so beautiful that the moon tried to chase her through the sky. Is this Tolkien or is this a different story I'm thinking of? I don't know. I think it's Tolkien. It could just be a different myth, but the reason that the moon has so many spots on it is because he tried to catch up to the sun, and that burned him because he was chasing after her beauty, and that's why the moon has spots. That could, I'm failing in my Tolkien knowledge because I think that's a Tolkien story, but it could just be just a myth from somewhere in the world, but I'm not sure.
It's hard to keep them all straight.
Yes, that is true. But Scarface, a very, very good person. We don't often get, truly good characters in mythology, but we did a lot of them actually in this section.
His wife was a good person. She said, you're a good guy, even though you got this big scar on your face. So if you get this thing done, then absolutely come back. And when he did, she's tears of joy, man. That's a sweet story.
Absolutely. Do you have any other thoughts on the story of Scarface, or does that just about summarize everything you were thinking?
No, that's pretty good. I wonder what kind of myths that our society would come up with, a few years from now when we're trying to not make any distinctions between male and female. Well,
hang on. You're not a biologist. I don't know what you're talking about.
You're not a biologist. You don't know what I'm talking about.
That's a shame.
And we don't need to go down. I was just being stupid. That's a whole different podcast about how a judge can make rulings on anything if they don't accept reality, some sort of basis of knowledge and reality.
That's a season 1 conversation there.
Yeah, there has to be some sort of assumptions when you're a judge as to what the nature of the English language and the law is, and if you can't accept the accepted definition for basic terms of reality, then you have no business with any responsibilities at all in your life, including making change for a $5 bill as a cashier somewhere, because you can't possibly be smart enough to figure out how to do that right.
That is a hot take right there. Thank you for that. A little bit of political commentary there. Appreciate it right at the end of this podcast. That was lovely.
That was just gratuitous. It had nothing to do with the subject.
Yeah, absolutely nothing. I was trying to think when you were saying that, how did we even get here? But
we got here because there are gender roles, historic gender roles in all across cultures, from ancient mythology till the present, and there's always exceptions to it, with female warriors or males that are have different characteristics or whatever the stereotype is for that culture. And so there's always exceptions, but you have to have the rule before you have the exceptions.
True.
And everybody nowadays, well, not everybody, it's a small minority of people that want to have everything be the exception. They want the rule to be the exception. There's nothing but exceptions. There's no rules.
Good thoughts there. Good explanation. Jay, did you have
No.
any overall?
It's a good thing we don't have any listeners. Otherwise, we'd be banned. If anybody listened to this, we'd be in big trouble.
We've actually been getting a slight uptick in downloads recently, I've noticed. We used to hover around 130 downloads in a month, but we've hit like 175-ish over the past 30 days. So make sure
wildfire.
If you're just streaming, make sure to give us a download, because that helps me see the stats more clearly, because I don't get stats on all the streams that we get. I get stats on the downloads that we get. I can go like individually to like Spotify or to like Google Podcasts and see like the streams I get specifically for that platform. But Buzzsprout just tells me the downloads that I get across all platforms. I don't get to see the streams.
Interesting. So what are your basic or general thoughts about was it Algonquin?
Yes.
Of this section.
That was the topic of our whole episode. Yes, the Algonquin myths.
Yes.
I really liked all of these stories. I feel like that's what I say every single time. But we did
You have not said that you hate them yet.
That is true.
You have to find one that you hate.
I will have to find one that I hate. That's true. But we'll be coming up to Norse, and I really like Norse myths. But
I hate them.
That's a shame. But I was going to say, we've just saw like just a lot of genuinely good characters. And that's what I really like to see. They were just good moral characters who went out on a mission, that they did good things. And that's the story that's remembered. I feel like that's kind of an issue in a lot of the other myths, is that a lot of the stories passed down are the ones about the people who did terrible things. I think it's just kind of refreshing to hear, well, here's somebody who did something really good, and he was welcomed by the community, and he did what he accomplished to do, and he had somebody who loved him, and it was good. I also think it was good to hear those stories of people just coming to terms with things as they are, like we saw with the chief whose bride passed away. He spent some time with her, luckily, and then he came back, and well, I guess I can't change that now. It's time to move on and be as best a leader as I can be. And I think that's just some very good moral stories, I think, in this section, which I really liked.
Yeah, excellent, good points.
Thank you. What were your overall points? Did I already ask you that, and that's how you transferred into?
That's how we got on the wrong track.
Maybe I should stop asking you that question.
I could start talking about all sorts of other hot button topics if you want to, but we're getting running a little long.
Yes, we are 54 minutes in.
That's enough. That's enough. Sharing to the world free of charge. The brilliant thoughts of the father and son duo of Unlimited Opinions.
True.
Yes. Wore the season 2 giveaway shirt to much acclaim throughout the greater Jefferson County, Missouri area.
Did anybody comment on your shirt, or did they just kind of ignore you? Of course, yeah.
Yes, it's just a t-shirt.
Yes, it is just a t-shirt. Nobody cares.
Someday.
Someday, those T-shirts will be worth millions of dollars because there were only like 5 of them made, and there's only one out there that does not belong to a member of our family. So one day he will be able to sell that for millions of dollars when we're both famous for our podcasting exploits.
Well, if we bury it long enough and it's found, it'll become very valuable.
True.
Like 500 years from now, it'll be something.
I guess, you have a point there. That is true. I think we're getting a little delirious and just kind of saying things now.
No, I mean, don't you think that's true? Like pottery,
Mm-hmm.
if you have pottery or a coin, like an ancient Greek coin that's like the only one left around,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes so valuable now.
Well, shirts decompose is the issue. Much easier than pottery and coins. So I don't know.
That's why it's going to be so rare.
We're going to seal it in an airtight safe somewhere like a mile below the Earth's surface, and it'll be worth millions of dollars when it's found. That's the golden ticket.
They'll have to have a map, a treasure map, to lead them to it too. Because it's going to be that far down. They'll never find it.
Yeah, it'll be a whole production. That's our season 3 giveaway. Will be a treasure map to the safe that we've buried a mile beneath the Earth, and somebody has to go out and find the shirt buried underground.
We could. There's some sinkholes in St. John County.
You're not putting anything in a sinkhole. That is not happening.
I thought you were for real here. We can really go down on that.
Oh my God. All right. Well, I think that's about enough of this episode. You can follow us on Twitter. I always say that. Make sure to give us a follow at capital ULMTD opinions with a capital O. ULMTD opinions on Twitter. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
And this has been Unlimited Opinions. Let's get to that sinkhole and throw a shirt down it.
Well, we have to encase it in something.
True. Let's go out and get a safe.
There's all sorts of sinkholes and caves down there because it has a bunch of, is it limestone or is it, yeah, it's lime. And so, the underground water becomes streams, like the or like in other area, like in Jefferson County, where it's rockier, you'll have the water table and it kind of acts as a slow-moving river. But in some areas it'll actually eat away, and then you have these huge caverns and stuff.
Our water table here in Kirksville, we were learning about this in plant science, sits underneath a line of coal. So if you don't filter it, it smells like rotten eggs because of like the sulfurness in the coal. Yeah.
Oh, I did not know there was coal up that way.
Apparently
Have there ever been any coal mines up in northern Missouri?
Not that I know of off the top of my head. It's mostly just agriculture up here, but
it might not be dense enough to really effectively mine it and use it as fuel.
Yes, well, this has been our after credits conversation on on the water tables of the Missouri area. Lovely.
It really is interesting stuff if you get into it.
It is.